Hello, everybody. It's Zeus Caravella from ZK Research, and it's week 15 of Real Time Recorded. I'm here with Dave Michaels, my partner in crime. Dave, that does not look like Colorado where you are right
No,
now.
it's a little warmer, a little sunnier. I'm in beautiful Sedona, Arizona. I almost said that wrong. And out here with my dog and my wife, and we're in an Airbnb, and it's not a bad place to be.
Yeah, I like Sedona. It's the only bearable part of Arizona where you don't roast just,
There's
by walking outside.
a lot of trees here. I was
Um,
surprised.
yes. Yeah, no, it's quite nice, and you can go hiking and stuff like that. So good for you to get away from it a bit. So this is a pretty busy week for news. The big news, obviously, was Coinbase, but we won't talk about that. Uh, Second on that list, though, was probably the nearly $20 billion acquisition, 19.7, I think it wound up being, for Microsoft buying Nuance Communications, who's been a leader in speech text technology for a long, long time. In fact, Nuance has been around, oh gosh, almost 20 years, I think. For as long as I've been an analyst, I've known Nuance.
Yep.
This was sort of an interesting move for Microsoft. I read a lot of the things that some of the analysts have written. I know you wrote a post on it on Talking Points. Blair Pleasant wrote something on it on VC Strategies as well. And there was a lot of focus on the conversational AI aspect of it, but I actually don't think it really had anything to do. Well, obviously it was conversational AI focused, but I do believe when Satya said it was to get him into healthcare, you don't spend $16 million to buy a technology, right? Cisco buys companies all the time that are a few hundred million and they tuck that technology into their product. And so if Microsoft really wanted conversation AI, they just would have bought somebody or, like Unifor or something, or built it themselves. This was about getting themselves into healthcare. They've been trying to be a bigger healthcare company, for years. They came out with a healthcare cloud. Frankly, that product really hasn't gone anywhere for them. I think Azure has some stability problems compared to AWS, so they've struggled in that. So I think this is a good entryway for them to get into healthcare. Nuance, of course, is extremely strong in that vertical, and from an overall acquisition perspective, this was huge, right? This was almost as big as LinkedIn, which I think was $26
Yep.
billion, second biggest acquisition they've ever made. So this was a big bet Satya was making. I think it was a good move for him. I think there's probably more to come. But healthcare, obviously, with all the stuff going on with the pandemic, that whole industry is transforming. It's been one that I've been wanting to see change and become more cloud-based for years, but I've written several blogs on it, but just how stuck in yesterday that vertical's been. So hopefully Microsoft can be a change agent for it. I know you had a lot of thoughts on it in your
Yeah,
blog.
I put a few thoughts on the blog post, but those are really quick thoughts. The day of the news. I think your reaction is kind of interesting to me because there's a lot of focus on the high price that they paid, and is it worth it? And obviously it's a lot of money. $19 billion is a lot of money, no matter how you slice it. But on the other hand,
Yeah, they have the
well, they
money.
have we're talking couch cushions is what I wrote in my blog post, and the company is evaluated at what, $1 trillion or something. I mean, it was a 2 trillion. I don't even remember. Microsoft is so incredibly wealthy right now. They have the cash, but bottom line is, it's a 23% uh, increase in valuation over what Nuance was trading for the week before, the Friday before the announcement, and that's pretty typical. So basically, whatever Nuance was worth, it was worth about 19, 18, whatever, $19 billion. And so the question is it going to be worth more now? And the answer is yes, because now they're going to have access to all of Microsoft's cloud technology and Microsoft's customers. And Microsoft's going to get a lot out of this too, because a lot of these articles have been talking about how it increases Microsoft's TAM, which is what you're focused on in the healthcare space. And that's, I saw some statistics. Nuance is serving 500,000 clinicians. 77% of U.S. hospitals are using Nuance. 75% of all U.S. radiologists. So a definite expansion into healthcare, which is very valuable. But there's so many more plays here because natural language processing technology is going to get used across. It's going to be used in dynamics. I can see it. We featured Nuance in the Innovation Showcase in 2018, and it wasn't for their healthcare. It was for their biometric capability. They were doing authentication of the speaker by their biometrics of their voice, That's going to play right into Dynamics with fraud protection. It's going to play right into Microsoft Teams with the meetings. Microsoft Teams just announced a attributed speaker, which is using speakers in the room to figure out who was talking so they could put their name on the transcript. So here's some biometric technology on a much larger scale. So I think there's a lot of plays here, and Microsoft is going to be ramping up, or everyone is ramping up conversational AI technology, digital channels, and this fits into very nicely across the entire Azure portfolio. Amazon's done very well with Lex as in AWS. It's going to fall. It's going to fit across the Teams portfolio, the 365 portfolio, and I just think it's a very strong acquisition in general. So I'm pretty pleased with this. I'm pretty pleased with the price.
Yeah, well, and I've always felt that if an acquisition's a good acquisition, you can't pay too much for it. My point is, I'm sure they're going to do a lot of other stuff with the technology, but you don't drop $20 billion on a technology. You spend that much money to move into an entirely new market, and so that market.
I think you're confused about scale of things. I mean, you're speaking normal companies, not Microsoft valuation. This is nothing. Microsoft's got no time to waste on a $300,000 or $1 million acquisition. No interest in that. You got to think at a whole different level with Microsoft. But conversational AI is a big theme this week in general because we also had Nvidia with their Jarvis announcement. I think you were pretty close to that, weren't you, Zeus?
Yeah, I attended. They had their GPU technology conference known as GTC. I wrote a no jitter post on it, and what they announced was that Jarvis went GA. They announced Jarvis last year, and what Jarvis is their conversational AI toolkit. And it's a pretty cool toolkit. As is the case with NVIDIA, they do all things AI pretty well. They've trained this this conversation AI agent using, I think it was something like 60,000 hours of voice, using 20 accents. The accuracy of it's about 90% today. It's not a product per se, as it is a toolkit that other companies, enterprises, the tech community can use to embed into their own product. One of the interesting things about it is they've built the models and they understand that there's a lot of nuances. See, tie back to the last one. In different verticals, and so for customers that want to be able to customize it, for different verticals, they don't have to build their own models from the ground up. The company offers a low-code toolkit called TAO, which stands for Train, Adapt, and Optimize, that encapsulates the entire workflow of optimizing the AI model. So they can use that as a way to retrain the model with their own specific needs. And it's a pretty cool product. They announced that it does translation between a bunch of different languages: English, French, German, Spanish, Russian, I think Mandarin and Japanese as well. One of the really interesting features they had was the ability to bring kind of expressiveness and controllability to virtual agents and the systems. Jensen Huang, their CEO, gave a demo of that where they had the Jarvis agent say, "The more you buy, the more you save," which is something that he always says. And he didn't like the way he said it, so he changed the inflection of it to be, "The more you buy, the more you save." And so you can actually do that with it. For those who have been following NVIDIA, they also have a product. By the way, they announced that T-Mobile was joined us in an analyst call, and they announced they'd be using Jarvis for their own customer service. Mozilla is using it as part of their common voice. So they've already got some good customers using it. One of the things that I had asked in the pre-brief was, is this the same underlying technology in the product known as Maxine, which was their video AI toolkit, and indeed is. They don't have multiple development paths going on there. Now, if you remember, Maxine was adopted by Avaya. They're using that as part of their Spaces AI. At the show, Pexip and TouchCast also announced they'd be using Maxine. The TouchCast one, I'll let you talk about Pexip. I know you're a lot closer than I am. The TouchCast one, TouchCast's an interesting company. They do virtual conferences, and they're trying to figure out how to use Maxine and Jarvis as a way of actually doing, these virtual events better, right? Because I think we've all kind of grown tired of the see you, see me type of thing. But if I can find a way to get people to interact differently, that would be pretty cool. But what I like about NVIDIA is they roll out these complete systems. It's not just, here's a GPU, you'll go figure it out. And they're becoming much more of an enterprise player, and that was one of my big takeaways from GTC this year.
Yeah, those are some really good points on on Nvidia, and it's an interesting because I never wrote about Nvidia before. I mean, it was they're not an enterprise communications company; they're a semiconductor company and a GPU company. But as you pointed out, they've really been expanding, and AI has really been expanding, and all of a sudden, Nvidia keeps coming up on a regular basis. Um, and I'm really excited about what Avaya was doing with Maxine in terms of spaces that you've mentioned, and they're really showing how, or I think Nvidia is really showing how these types of technologies like virtual backgrounds are democratized, right? They're available to everybody, and I would say Avaya's got some advantages in the sense that theirs is completely client or endpoint agnostic, which has been a pretty good story for Avaya. Now Pexip is doing the same thing. Pexip has announced they're using Maxine for noise removal. They said they're looking at virtual backgrounds, and they're going to look at some other services out of Maxine and um, and Jarvis as well. But I watched those same demos that you were referring to when Jansen was doing his showing the technology, and of course the demos were fantastic, and he was showing translation, he was showing transcription, uh, and I thought they were great. But I kind of feel bad for Jansen because he's got this image with a leather jacket, and I'm sure you know he's always got this leather jacket all the time, and he's got to be hot. I mean, he's got to be. I just feel bad for the guy. He's always wearing a hot jacket. That's a bad uniform to be associated with. That's all I got to say. So the last announcement we're going to cover on this week's episode is Vonage announced visual engagement, AI, and omni-channel features for its contact center, Vonage Contact Center, or VCC. Now, a lot of people don't realize how much technology Vonage already has, right? So they've had their own telephony stack for a while. They've got their own contact center stack when they acquired New Voice Media. They've got their own video stack when they acquired TalkBox. They've got a bunch of AI technology when they acquired Over AI, and they've got all this omni-channel capability with Nextmo. So it's really nice. They've had all these individual stacks to see how they're pulling these things together, and that's exactly what they've done here with this announcement. So now they're giving their contact center agents the ability to invite a customer to a video chat through either an SMS, that's the Nextmo part, or through WhatsApp, which is also through Nextmo. So they're using the video from TalkBox into the contact center. It's just really nice the way these are all coming together. And I'm a big fan of contact center of video in the contact center. I think that makes a lot of sense. I had a use case with my car. I was trying to figure out something, and we couldn't resolve it. So I asked if we could switch the call to Zoom, and I turned on my camera, and it was solved very quickly. So I think that the contact center is going to have a great future in video. And the pandemic kind of accelerated that, so I think Vonage is right on track here. And also, TalkDesk recently published some research that showed that they're seeing strong demand for digital channels in general, when they especially noted video chat. So I think it's all kind of coming together here. I really like the way this Vonage announcement looks.
I actually I actually don't believe there's a role for video much in the contact center. I think contact centers are built on scale and agents be able to handle multiple calls at once and chat. I do think the case that you outlined, though, that is a perfect case where I want to be able to show somebody some material and show her, for a return or some damage, field service agents. And I think it lines up nicely with what you and I have talked about with the expansion of contact center to non-contact center agents,
Hmm.
right? So I was talking with an insurance company that's giving contact center seats now to its field service people. So that field service person could go out in the field, they could take a video of the car, they could show it to a garage and get an estimate right there. That's a perfect use case for video in the contact center. I think the whole I want to talk to my bank or whatever. I do think there's some high net worth use cases with financial services firms, even like high end retail or something that might use it. I think in general, your United Airlines or your Comcast agent aren't going to be on video with you anytime
You,
soon.
you
But
know,
I think from
I
a
think I
from
think
a
these things change over time, and I'm married to a European, and for years, even though we had Skype and various video capabilities, she felt it always more normal to call home over the telephone. And I don't know when that changed, but at some point it changed, and now whenever she talks to anyone in Europe, it's almost always through a video type of capability. And my kids are always talking on a video type of capability. They're always using, either Facebook or some sort of visual app when they communicate. And I think it's just kind of gradually changing, and it's getting to the point where the contact center feels prehistoric, right? It's typically voice only. It's typical telephony only. Um, and even if it's omni-channel and they're doing text on whatever, it's still pretty primitive stuff. And I disagree with you, Aziz. I really think we're going to see a pretty significant and rapid shift toward video-enabled interactions. When I call from my hotel room to the front desk, why isn't that a video call? Now, I think one of the things that we're going to see is one-way video, particularly in a hotel room. But I think we're going to see one-way video, and here in this case, because I've heard the response, you don't want to see our agents, whatever that kind of thing. But here in the hotel, for example, they're uniformed, they're presented to the public, and it just makes more sense. I think we're going to see a big increase in video in general, whether it be contact center or video calling, and that's why I like this announcement.
Yeah, well, we can disagree. I think there are use cases. I think it ruins the scale model. I've talked to a lot of contact center managers about this, and it's hard to now. If you could automate a lot of the interactions, perhaps you could save the interactions. But I do think there is a role, like I said, for the people that are adopting contact center. There are contact center agents, and that's a perfect play to Vonage because they have that integrated stack, and so their whole their value prop is bringing UC and CC together. The use cases I'm talking about favor that, right? So I think as that transition happens, you'll see more video in the contact center, but not for your typical interaction. I think it's a different type of interaction.
All right, well, that wraps up this episode of week 15, 2021 of Real Time Recorded. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back next week with week 16.